back to Rating the List, where we review, discuss, and reimagine popular movie lists objectively. We're your hosts, I'm Jerry.
And I'm Brad. And on this episode, we'll be exploring number 23 from Sports Illustrated's The Top 50 Sports Movies of All Time.
All right, number 23 is The Hustler, released in 1961, directed by Robert Rosen, starring Paul Newman, Jackie Gleason, and George C. Scott.
Small-time pool hustler Fast Eddie Felson arrives in New York City to challenge Small-time pool hustler Fast Eddie Felson arrives in New York City to challenge legendary Minnesota Fats. His talent can't overcome his hubris, and he loses, only to build himself up again for a second challenge against Minnesota Fats.
Good movie.
This is a great movie. This movie transcends the sports genre. This is one of the greatest movies of all time. This is a absolute classic. I'm pretty sure it's on AFI as the top 100 movies of all time.
Probably.
This movie is just incredibly well done. It's so good. You've got the pool stuff is done really well, but it's really about this is more of a character study than anything else. The thing I've always found the most interesting about it is when you watch it with the sequel, The Color of Money, which Paul Newman, plays the character again. What this came out in
1961.
Okay, so you've got almost 30 years in between the two films, and you get to see him play. We actually watched it as a double feature. We watched The Color of Money on the side list because it didn't make this main list.
Weird.
I think it's just one of those things where they choose the one over the other.
Yeah, probably.
To give a kind of a wider range. When you cultivate lists, that happens a lot, which is fine.
Right, and then that leaves room for movies that,
And probably like when you start talking about, they know when people start talking about, they're probably going to talk about both movies together. I just think it's really interesting to see the character at two different points in his career. Like in this one, he's young and he's got that problem that a lot of super talented people have in their youth is they just have this hubris about them and they can't see their own weaknesses and faults. And he gets into this, this competition with Minnesota Fats, who is a real person that Jackie Gleason plays. Jackie Gleason's fantastic in this movie.
So good.
He challenges this guy, and he is absolutely like crushing him. She's just completely outplaying this guy, but he doesn't see that there's a long game being played here. And instead of being able to simply walk away with all of this money, he's got to keep going, and he's got to keep going, and he just starts giving it back. Like I've played in poker games with these kinds of people where they come in early and they're just running the table and everything's going great for them, and the more experienced players are just kind of sitting back and they're not getting anxious and they're not losing their cool because they know eventually this kid is going to give his money back to everyone and then some, which is exactly what happens here.
Yeah.
Like he goes from having all the money almost to none of the money.
It really reminds me, now that I'm thinking about it, of the movie we just watched the other day, yesterday, which was about Steve Prefontaine.
Yeah.
It's kind of like they have the same drive to be the best.
It's a very common thing.
Yeah.
Especially like in individual athletes. It's a super common thing. Like when you're the only person, it happens a little bit in pro sports, but team sports tend to kind of round the edges on that stuff because you have to play within the construct of a team or you're just not going to you're not going to make it. But when you're in an individual sport, like every decision you make is on you. So you get, guys like this or Prefontaine, like you're talking about, or people that play in golf, those individual kinds of pursuits, this kind of personality comes out a lot.
Yeah.
And, you know, he loses all of his money and he's kind of stuck. And while he's stuck, he meets this woman played by Piper Laurie. And, you know, I think he settled into it thinking it would just kind of be a temporary fling thing, but they end up falling in love. And then, you know, he kind of has to, you know, build up his bankroll again because he's just absolutely
broke.
He's completely broke, but he has to win.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to like redeem himself and play this guy again and beat him. And he's just like that whole thing is just like she's already self-destructive. She's an alcoholic. I don't think they really explicitly say it in the film, but I got a sense that she's older than him.
Yeah, I didn't really understand that whole dynamic, like what that was for. I don't know if it was just for him to have somewhere to live.
I think that was part of it. I think that was part of his hustle, but then I think he developed very genuine feelings for her.
Mm-hmm.
And she was clearly just a fragile person, which is why, you know, when he ends up like, you know, I gotta walk away from this, and she like, you know, she's like kind of abused by his handler.
Oh yeah.
And then she ends up killing herself.
Yeah, sad.
Because the handler is basically like, you know, he makes money off of him, so he doesn't want him to just kind of settle into this like domesticity. He wants him out there playing and, you know, doing what he needs to do to make him money.
Yeah.
And then, you know, he takes on Minnesota Fats again, and he falls prey to the same demons that he fell to the first time. So you kind of end this movie with him completely losing it. And then when you get to The Color of Money, it's all these years later, and he doesn't play pool anymore at all. Mm-hmm. He's become like he's still hustling because he's like selling like, you know, liquor and this kind of thing. So he's kind of hustling to make a living. And then he comes across Tom Cruise's character, who reminds him exactly of himself. Super talented guy, full of hubris. And his whole mission here is to turn this guy into a version of himself that doesn't lose all the money to Minnesota Fats.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where this all, and in the midst of this, he has this kind of reconciliation with himself and with the game. And it's a really interesting full character arc. I don't think The Color of Money gets the kind of appreciation for it because it's a very, very different movie. Like Martin Scorsese's version of this is completely different than The Hustler. They're very, very tonally different movies.
Yeah.
But I think they still fit together really well.
They do.
I think he really carried the whole arc of Eddie Felson to its conclusion in a really, really interesting way. And seeing this at the beginning, Paul Newman's performance in this is off the charts fantastic. Jackie Gleason, I don't think has ever been better. Like if you've only seen him like in The Honeymooners, seeing him in this movie playing a completely different character is an extremely interesting experience. He is so good in this movie. The way that they shoot the pool is really, really well done. Like, you know, you never see them actually, you know, for the most part, the editing on it is really, really great. Like, you know, you can tell like a lot of the shots are shot by professional players for the most part, but you get a guy like, I think Jackie Gleason could actually play some pool. I think probably Paul Newman probably learned to play some pool. So you see them do a lot of shots, but like some of the really, really complicated shots, they kind of edit around that. They do that in The Color of Money as well.
Yeah.
But
one thing I noticed in this movie too is the acting. So it's a lot of people standing around watching people play pool, which can be kind of, you know, not so exciting. But there's a lot of eye acting in this movie where you're watching people and they're looking at somebody and they're watching what happened. They're looking at people's reactions to what just happened. And so that was kind of cool.
Well, and I think the interesting thing about that too is how it sets the mood.
Mm-hmm.
Like the mood, especially like the mood, especially like when the mood's kind of a little bit frantic at the beginning when he's really really winning, and you kind of see like a few of the people like think, oh shit, is this like is Minnesota Fats done?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's some guys that know exactly what's going to happen
Yeah.
here because they have seen this happen with every small town Eddie Felson type guy for years and years and years. And Minnesota Fats is Minnesota Fats because he knows how to beat these guys.
Yeah.
He knows how to play the long game against them. He's probably not the best pool player in the world, but he is definitely the best pool hustler in the world.
Yeah.
And you know, someone like Eddie Felson is actually he's a good hustler, but he's a great player. But he just gets completely out hustled in this movie.
Yeah.
It's such a good movie.
Very good movie. Yeah.
And the cinematography is incredible.
Yeah, it's got a really good even the production design is very like there's no glitz and glamour about this movie. It's literally like, hey, you want to see a hustler? This is where he lives. He lives in a pool hall.
Yeah.
You know, like this is what a pool hall looks like at that time. Like,
yeah, and I think that's another interesting kind of dichotomy between these two movies is you get a little bit more of the glitzier side of things.
Mm-hmm.
You can see that, you know, since the time of Eddie Felson in The Hustler, there's like a professional league that's come up, and you know, like you can watch it like on ESPN and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. So there's production value. Anytime you get TV involved, stuff gets elevated.
Oh yeah.
So you kind of take away the smoky backroom
Mm-hmm.
kind of aspect of it, and it's a little more polished, and you see that in The Color of Money. In this, in The Hustler, you just see the smoky back room, and you see the kind of people that live in that world.
Yes.
Which Eddie Felson is.
You
one
have
of
the
them.
people playing the sport and the people betting on the sport, and that's it, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can kind of see how it changes in The Color of Money, where it's a little bit more accepted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the same can be said with poker, right?
I was just gonna say like when poker really hit big, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, and all the like TV money flooded in, and ESPN was, you know, broadcasting the World Series of Poker, and the Travel Channel had you know, the WPT, and you know, it was just that whole like Texas backroom thing that, you know, someone like Doyle Brunson lived in, where people actually had like guns at the table and people got shot and shit. That stuff is like, you know, that stuff went away when it became a little bit corporate. And the same thing happens in these two different movies. You kind of see both parts of it. You see the beginning of it, and then, you know, what it ultimately becomes.
Yeah.
I really like this movie. I gave it an 86. Jerry gave it a 70, so the list score is 78.
All right. If you have comments, if you've seen The Hustler and like to put in your 2 cents, please do so in the comments. If you'd like to contact us directly, please do so at ratingthelist@gmail.com. But I think that's it for now. I'm Jerry.
I'm Brad.
And we're Rating the List. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.